December 19th, 1944. Ardennes Forest, Belgium. The blade drives upward beneath the ribcage. Steel pierces flesh. The German sergeant's eyes widen in shock. His mouth opens, but no sound comes out. Thomas Blackwood twists the knife. The man collapses into the snow. 7 more rifles swing toward him. 45 seconds until freedom or death. This is the story of how a Canadian lumberjack, armed with nothing but a hidden knife and an insane psychological trick, killed 7 German soldiers in less than 1 minute while completely surrounded and disarmed. The military buried the story for 50 years because what Thomas Blackwood did that day violated every rule in the combat manual. They called it crazy. They called it suicidal. They called it impossible. But the reconnaissance patrol that found the bodies 3 days later counted 7 frozen corpses scattered across 30 meters of blood-stained snow. 1 man, 1 knife, 45 seconds. And it all started with a laugh. To understand how this happened, you need to go back 4 years earlier, to a fishing village in Nova Scotia, where winters lasted 6 months, and survival meant learning to kill before you could read. The German offensive, that would become known as the Battle of the Bulge, had just begun. 200,000 Nazi troops crashed through Allied lines like a tidal wave. Communications shattered. Units scattered. Thousands of soldiers found themselves trapped behind enemy lines. Most surrendered. Most died. Thomas Blackwood did neither. The morning of December 16th started with artillery. Not the occasional shell that soldiers learned to ignore. This was thousands of guns firing simultaneously. A symphony of destruction that shook the earth and turned the sky orange. Tommy Blackwood was sleeping in a basement in the village of Sandva when the first shells hit. The building above him exploded. Wooden beams crashed down. Dust filled his lungs. He stumbled through the rubble and found himself in a communications trench. An artillery shell landed 10 meters away. The blast threw him against a wooden support beam. Everything went black. When Tommy woke up, the sun was already setting. His head throbbed. Blood dripped from a cut above his left eye. Around him lay the bodies of men he had eaten breakfast with that morning. The German advance had swept past his position. His unit had retreated west without knowing he was still alive. Tommy collected weapons from the dead. 2 grenades, extra ammunition, a combat knife. Then he started moving through the forest. 3 days of running. 3 days without sleep. 3 days of crawling through snow, hiding from patrols, eating pine bark to stay alive. His father had taught him how to survive in the wilderness. Those lessons from the forests of Nova Scotia were about to save his life. But first, let me tell you about the man who would do the impossible. Thomas Blackwood was born in 1920 in Fraserville, Nova Scotia. Population 847. A place where poverty was not something to be ashamed of, because everyone shared it equally. His father, William, was a lumberjack who disappeared into the northern forests every November and did not return until April. 5 months cutting timber. Just enough money to keep the family alive another year. When Tommy was 7 years old, his father handed him a hunting rifle that weighed almost as much as the boy himself. "You see that rabbit?" William asked. "You have 1 bullet. Miss it, and the family eats less this week." Tommy did not miss. He never missed. From age 7 to 18, Tommy spent thousands of hours in those frozen forests. This was not recreational hunting. This was survival. Each rabbit, each deer, meant the difference between a full stomach and an empty one. He learned to read animals. A deer will tell you if it is alert or relaxed, through how it stands, through the direction its ears point. A bear will tell you if it is about to attack, through the position of its shoulders. Tommy learned to read these signals in a split second. Hesitate, and you become prey instead of predator. But here is what the military could never teach in any training course. Tommy learned to read people the same way. He could walk into a room and know immediately who was looking for trouble, who was scared underneath, who had let their guard down. 11 years in the Nova Scotia wilderness had turned him into a human lie detector. His mother Elizabeth taught him something else, something that would save his life in that frozen forest 4 years later. "Son," she would say, "life will knock you down many times, but as long as you get back up, you have not lost." Tommy never forgot those words. In 1938, his father died in a logging accident. A massive pine tree fell in the wrong direction and crushed William Blackwood before anyone could react. Tommy became the head of his family at 18. He carried the weight of 4 siblings and his mother on his shoulders. That weight followed him when he enlisted in 1941. When the recruitment officer asked what skills he had, Tommy answered simply, "I know how to shoot, and I know how to survive in the woods." He scored the highest marks in his training class. By December 1944, Tommy had 3 years of combat experience. He had survived battles that killed most of his friends. He had learned that the skill of reading people could be the difference between living and dying. Now he was alone, deep in enemy territory, and he had just made a fatal mistake. On the afternoon of December 19th, Tommy stopped beside a frozen stream. He used his rifle butt to break through the ice and scooped up water with his hands. For the first time in 3 days, he had clean water to drink. In that moment, he allowed himself to feel hope. Almost there, just a little more. Then he heard boots crunching through snow directly behind him. Tommy spun around and found himself staring at 8 German soldiers, all weapons pointed at his head. He slowly raised his hands. The German sergeant stepped forward and searched him roughly. He took the rifle, the pistol, the combat knife, the grenades, everything. But they missed the small blade strapped to Tommy's left calf, hidden beneath the thick fabric of his uniform trousers. A German Luftwaffe knife he had taken from a dead paratrooper in Italy. Small, sharp, and now the only thing standing between him and a prison camp. 1 knife against 8 men with rifles. The equation was impossible. Or was it? Tommy stood there with his hands raised and his mind racing. The rational part of him was screaming that this was suicide. 8 men, 8 rifles, 1 knife. The probability of survival was almost 0. Being captured was not the end. Thousands of Allied prisoners were living in camps across Germany. The war would probably end in a few months. He could survive. He could go home. He could see his mother again. But another part of Tommy spoke, the wild part. The part forged in frozen forests where weakness meant death. That part reminded him of his mother's words, "As long as you get back up, you have not lost." That part reminded him that freedom was only 10 kilometers away. 10 kilometers he had walked through hell to reach. Tommy Blackwood made his decision. It was not a decision of logic. It was a decision of instinct, of refusing to accept fate, of the fire that never dies in someone raised in hunger and cold. He would fight. Now he just needed an opportunity. 1 moment. 1 opening. And he knew exactly how to create it. Tommy started observing. The sergeant, early 30s, wearing an iron cross, confident stance. The most dangerous one. 2 sentries at the outer edge, backs turned, watching the forest. Good discipline. The remaining 5 soldiers, ages 18 to 25. Tommy read exhaustion in their eyes, tension in their shoulders. They had been fighting for days, and now they were relaxing because they thought the situation was under control. This was their first mistake. Second mistake, they did not bind his hands. Standard procedure for capturing prisoners was immediate restraint. But they did not. Third mistake, they were standing too close together. 5 men within 3 meters. Close enough that a single grenade could take them all. Fourth mistake, their weapons were lowered. They slung rifles over shoulders or held them at their sides. Nobody kept a weapon in ready firing position. Fifth mistake, they were distracted. 2 of them lit cigarettes. 1 was making jokes. They were acting like the danger was over. Tommy noticed all of this in 30 seconds, and he noticed something else. The knife they had missed, the small blade that could change everything. But how do you attack 8 armed men with 1 small knife? The answer came from 11 years of hunting in Nova Scotia, from reading animals, from understanding psychology. Tommy had an idea, a crazy idea, an idea that would either save his life or get him killed in the next 60 seconds. And it all started with a laugh. In Part 2, we will see how Thomas Blackwood used psychological warfare to create 45 seconds of chaos. How he turned capture into a trap. How 1 lumberjack from Nova Scotia killed 7 trained German soldiers using nothing but a knife, captured weapons, and the craziest battlefield tactic the Ardennes forest had ever witnessed. Tommy Blackwood stood in the snow with 8 rifles pointed at his head and 1 hidden knife strapped to his calf. In Funmot, we saw how this Canadian lumberjack from Nova Scotia got separated from his unit during the Battle of the Bulge, survived 3 days behind enemy lines, and got captured by a German patrol. We saw how he made the insane decision to fight instead of surrender. 8 armed men against 1 disarmed prisoner. The mathematics of suicide. But Tommy had a weapon those German soldiers could not see. 11 years of reading animals in frozen forests. 11 years of understanding psychology. And 1 crazy idea that would either free him or kill him in the next minute. The statistics were brutal. In December 1944, the survival rate for Allied soldiers attempting escape after capture was less than 2%. Most died trying. The rest spent years in prison camps. Tommy was about to change those numbers. And it all started with something the Germans never expected. A laugh. Tommy's mind worked at lightning speed while his body remained still. He had 30 seconds, maybe 40, before they tied his hands or forced him to march. 30 seconds to create an opportunity that did not exist. He studied the 8 men surrounding him one more time. The sergeant, the leader, standing 2 meters away. Confident. Experienced. The most dangerous. The 2 sentries at the perimeter, backs turned, watching the forest. Doing their job correctly. The 5 younger soldiers, clustered together, rifles lowered, lighting cigarettes. Relaxed. That was the key word. Relaxed. They thought the situation was under control. They thought an unarmed prisoner presented no threat. They had made 5 critical mistakes. But mistakes alone would not save Tommy. He needed to make them make a 6th mistake. He needed them to drop their guard completely. Not just lower their weapons. Not just look away. He needed them to forget he was dangerous. And Tommy knew exactly how to do that. The idea came from hunting bears in Nova Scotia. A bear will attack if it feels threatened, but a bear will ignore prey that seems wounded, sick, or dying. Non-threatening. Tommy needed these 8 German soldiers to see him not as a prisoner of war, but as a broken man. Someone who had lost his mind. Someone who presented no danger whatsoever. And the fastest way to signal mental breakdown was behavior that made no sense. Behavior that confused. Behavior that lowered threat perception to 0. Tommy started to laugh. Not a fake laugh. Not a nervous chuckle. A real laugh that erupted from somewhere deep inside him. From the place where desperation meets clarity. From the place where fear transforms into action. The laugh began soft. Then it grew louder. Tommy bent over double, hands clutching his stomach, his whole body shaking. He laughed like a madman. He laughed as if he had just heard the funniest joke in the world. The German soldiers froze. This was not in any training manual. Their prisoner was laughing hysterically while 8 rifles pointed at his head. Confusion spread across their faces. They glanced at each other. What was happening? The sergeant frowned. He stepped closer. His rifle remained slung over his shoulder. "Stop laughing," he commanded in broken English. "What is funny?" Tommy kept laughing. Tears streamed down his face, but behind that mask of insanity, his eyes tracked everything. The sergeant walking closer. 2 meters. 1.5 meters. 1 meter. Close enough. The other soldiers lowering their weapons further. One man turning to say something to his friend. The 2 sentries glancing back to see what the noise was about. Perfect. Everything was perfect. Stage 1 complete. Confusion. Stage 2 complete. Concern. The soldiers were wondering if their prisoner had gone insane. 3 days alone in the frozen forest. No food, no sleep. Perhaps the stress had broken him mentally. Stage 3 unfolding now. Lowered guard. A madman was not a threat. He was pathetic rather than dangerous. Tommy watched it all happen exactly as he predicted. Shoulders dropped. Rifles lowered. The sergeant now less than 1 meter away. His face showed annoyance. His hands were empty. His rifle slung over his shoulder. "Be quiet," the sergeant said again. "You are crazy." Tommy raised his head. His eyes met the sergeant's eyes. And in that moment, the German officer saw something that made him freeze. Tommy's eyes were not the eyes of a madman. They were clear, sharp, focused, and they contained pure intent to kill. But the sergeant recognized this too late. Tommy's right hand was already moving. While pretending to clutch his stomach, his fingers had positioned themselves next to his left trouser leg. In one fluid motion, practiced thousands of times while hunting in Nova Scotia, he pulled the Luftwaffe knife from its hidden sheath. The blade flashed in the afternoon light. The sergeant's mouth opened to shout. He never finished. Tommy drove the knife upward beneath the ribcage, through the diaphragm, into the heart. He knew exactly where to strike. He had gutted hundreds of deer over the years. Human anatomy was not so different. The sergeant collapsed without a sound. Tommy caught the falling rifle before it hit the ground. A Mauser Kar 98K. Bolt action. 5 rounds in the magazine. He had used captured German weapons dozens of times. He knew this rifle like his own hands. The nearest soldier stood 2 meters away. A young man, probably 19 years old. A cigarette still hanging from his lips. His brain had not yet processed what was happening. Tommy fired from the hip. No time to aim, only instinct. The soldier fell. 1 second elapsed. Tommy pivoted left while working the bolt. The motion took less than half a second. Pure reflex from 3 years of combat. The third soldier was bringing his rifle up. Too slow. Tommy fired. The man dropped. The fourth soldier panicked and started running. Fatal mistake. Running meant turning his back. Tommy fired. Another body in the snow. The fifth soldier, one of the smokers, finally reacted. He raised his weapon. Tommy was already diving right while firing. The bullet struck the soldier's shoulder. Wounded, but not dead. 8 seconds total. Now the remaining Germans started shooting back. Tommy threw himself behind the sergeant's corpse as bullets tore through the air where he had been standing. He heard rounds hitting trees, heard shouting in German. 3 men left. The 2 sentries turning back from their posts. 1 soldier wounded, but still fighting. Tommy grabbed a stick grenade from the sergeant's belt, a Stielhandgranate, the distinctive German grenade with its long wooden handle. He pulled the friction cord, counted to 2, threw it toward the approaching sentries. 12 seconds. The explosion knocked 1 sentry off his feet permanently. The other was thrown down by the blast, but still alive. Tommy did not wait. He launched himself forward, not running straight, zigzagging, changing direction constantly, a technique learned from watching rabbits flee from foxes. Never move in a predictable pattern. The wounded soldier tried to aim, fired, missed. Tommy was too fast, too erratic. Tommy shot while moving. 1 round. The wounded soldier collapsed. 18 seconds. The last sentry had regained his feet. He was running toward a large tree, seeking cover. Smart. But Tommy was smarter. He circled left while the soldier expected him from the right. Tommy appeared from an unexpected angle, rifle already raised. 1 shot. The final soldier fell. 22 seconds elapsed. Silence crashed down like a physical weight. Not peaceful silence, the terrible silence after violence. Tommy stood in the middle of the forest. 7 bodies lay scattered in the snow, some face down, some twisted at unnatural angles. 1 man, shot in the leg during the chaos, was still alive, still conscious, watching Tommy with terrified eyes. Tommy's hands shook. Adrenaline flooded his system. His heart pounded so hard he could feel it in his temples. But he was alive. 22 seconds. 7 enemies. 1 knife. 1 captured rifle. He had done the impossible. Tommy forced himself to move. The gunfire would attract attention. Other German units might be nearby. He had minutes at most. He searched the bodies quickly. Ammunition, grenades, food, bread, sausage, chocolate. For someone who had barely eaten in 3 days, these were more valuable than gold. From the sergeant's map case, he found a detailed military map. It showed German patrol routes, defensive positions, supply lines throughout the Ardennes sector. Intelligence that could save hundreds of Allied lives. Tommy stuffed everything useful into a captured pack. He took the best rifle, strapped extra ammunition across his chest. Then he stopped. The wounded German soldier lay nearby. A man in his late 30s. The bullet had shattered his lower leg. Blood soaked into the snow. Their eyes met. The German's face showed fear and acceptance. He was waiting for the final bullet. Tommy raised his rifle. His finger rested on the trigger. For a long moment, neither man moved. Tommy looked into those eyes and saw exhaustion, the bone-deep weariness of someone who had seen too much war. A man following orders he probably never believed in, now lying in a frozen forest far from home, waiting to die. The German reminded Tommy of his father. Same age, same tired eyes, same weathered face of someone who had worked hard and had little to show for it. Tommy thought about the 7 men he had just killed. They probably had families too. Wives waiting at home. Children who would grow up without fathers. He had killed them because survival demanded it, because it was them or him. But this man was different, no longer a threat, just a wounded human being in the snow. Tommy lowered his rifle. He did not know exactly why. Perhaps because he had killed enough. Perhaps because executing a helpless person crossed a line he would not cross. Tommy turned and walked away. Behind him, the German soldier watched in disbelief. Gratitude flickered across his pain-twisted face. He was still going to die out here. The cold would take him. But his last moments would not be staring down an enemy rifle. Tommy disappeared into the trees. The map changed everything. He could now avoid German patrol routes with precision. He moved faster, partly because of the information, partly because of the food, but mostly because of something else. Energy born from doing the impossible. He had survived the insane. He had won the unwinnable. If he could kill 7 armed men in 22 seconds, he could do anything. But survival was not guaranteed yet. He was still deep in enemy territory, still 10 kilometers from Allied lines, and now he was carrying intelligence that made him a priority target. The Germans would find those bodies. They would send patrols. Lots of them. In Fire 3, we will see how Tommy used that captured map to navigate through the deadliest 24 hours of his life. How he outsmarted German search parties. How he survived when his body finally began to shut down from exhaustion and frostbite. And how 3 American soldiers almost shot him as a German spy when he finally reached Allied lines. The 22 seconds in the forest made history. But the 48 hours that followed would determine if that history would ever be told. 22 seconds. 7 German soldiers dead. 1 captured map showing enemy positions across the entire Ardennes sector. Thomas Blackwood had survived the impossible. He had turned capture into a massacre, using nothing but a hidden knife, a laugh, and 11 years of hunting instincts from Nova Scotia. But survival was not freedom. Not yet. Tommy was still deep behind enemy lines, still 10 kilometers from safety. And now he was carrying intelligence so valuable that the Germans would send every available patrol to hunt him down. The bodies in that forest would be found within hours, maybe sooner. When the Germans discovered 7 of their soldiers killed by 1 man, they would understand. Whoever did this was dangerous. Whoever did this had to be stopped. The 22 seconds of violence had just painted a massive target on Tommy's back. And the real hunt was about to begin. 3 hours after the killing, a German supply patrol found the bodies. 7 men frozen in the snow. Shell casings scattered everywhere. Evidence of grenades, blood trails. The scene told a clear story. Ambush. Professional. Deadly. The patrol leader immediately radioed headquarters. Within 30 minutes, the response came down from Division Command. Find whoever did this. Use every available unit. The German commander, studying the report, understood the implications. 7 soldiers killed in under a minute meant Allied special forces were operating in the area. Possibly commandos. Possibly saboteurs. Either way, they could not be allowed to escape. He issued orders. Quadruple all patrols between the combat zone and Allied lines. Set up checkpoints on every road and trail. Search every building, every farm, every barn within 20 kilometers. Use dogs if available. Spare no resources. Find them. Kill them. By nightfall on December 19th, the forest was swarming with German troops. 60 additional soldiers deployed specifically to hunt the killer. They moved in teams of 4, weapons ready, eyes scanning every shadow. They expected multiple enemies. A commando team, 5 men minimum, maybe 10. They did not know they were hunting one exhausted Canadian lumberjack who could barely walk. Tommy heard them before he saw them. Voices echoing through the trees, boots crunching through snow, dogs barking in the distance. He pressed himself against a fallen log and did not move. A patrol passed within 5 meters. 4 soldiers, alert, weapons ready, not making the same mistakes as the first group. Tommy held his breath, let them pass, kept moving west. But the German net was tightening. Tommy's body was failing. 4 days without real sleep. 4 days with almost no food. The bread and sausage taken from the dead soldiers had helped, but it was not enough. His feet had progressed from frostbite to serious damage. 2 toes on his left foot had no feeling at all. The skin had turned grayish-black. Walking sent shooting pain up his legs with every step. Worse, fever had set in. His forehead burned. His thoughts became confused. Sometimes he forgot where he was. Sometimes he thought he was back in Nova Scotia, hunting with his father. Then reality would crash back. The snow, the cold, the Germans hunting him. Keep moving. Just keep moving. On the night of December 20th, Tommy collapsed for the first time. He was crossing a frozen stream when his legs simply gave out. He fell face first into the ice, could not get up. His arms would not support his weight. His vision blurred. He knew this was hypothermia, the final stage, the body giving up, the brain releasing chemicals to ease the transition from life to death. Tommy tried to push himself up, failed, tried again, failed. His mother's voice echoed in his mind. As long as you get back up, you have not lost. He tried a 3rd time. This time, he made it to his knees, then to his feet. He swayed, nearly fell again, but he stayed upright, 1 foot in front of the other. Keep moving. December 21st, dawn. Tommy had been moving for 5 days. The Allied lines were close now, maybe 3 kilometers. He could hear artillery in the distance, American guns firing east. So close, but his body was shutting down. He could not feel his feet anymore. His hands were clumsy, fingers refusing to grip properly. The fever made everything shimmer and blur. He stumbled through a thin section of forest and nearly walked straight into a German checkpoint. 4 soldiers standing beside a road, a vehicle barrier, dogs. Tommy froze, dropped behind a snow-covered bush. The Germans had not seen him. Yet. He was trapped. The checkpoint blocked the road west. Going around would add hours to his journey. Hours he did not have. His body could not take much more. But charging through 4 alert soldiers with dogs was suicide. Even with surprise. Even with the captured rifle and grenades. Tommy crouched in the snow and watched. Waiting. Looking for an opening that might not come. Then luck intervened. An American artillery barrage hit German positions 2 kilometers to the south. The explosions were massive, continuous. The ground shook. All 4 checkpoint soldiers turned to look, distracted, worried. One of them grabbed binoculars and scanned toward the explosions. The dogs whined nervously. Tommy moved. He did not run. Running made noise. He walked quickly through the trees, parallel to the road, circled around the checkpoint at 50 meters distance. The Germans never looked his way. Their attention remained fixed on the artillery barrage. By the time Tommy cleared the checkpoint, he was 200 meters past. He kept moving. Every step, agony. Every breath, burning in his lungs. But moving. Then he heard English. 3 voices speaking American English. Tommy pushed through a line of bushes and stumbled onto a narrow forest road. 3 American soldiers standing beside a jeep. They spun around. Rifles came up, pointed at him. Tommy tried to speak. His voice came out as a croak. Canadian, Corporal Thomas Blackwood, Royal Canadian Regiment. The Americans stared. Tommy was wearing a German coat, carrying a German rifle. He looked like a vagrant or deserter. One American kicked the rifle away from Tommy's reach. Another kept his weapon trained. The third knelt down and searched him. Tommy fumbled at his boot with frozen fingers, pulled out his identification tags, held them up with a trembling hand. The American sergeant examined them carefully, looked at Tommy's face, at the German equipment, at the tags again. Long silence. Then the sergeant nodded. "Lower your weapons. This one's ours." They half-carried Tommy to the jeep. He could barely walk now. His feet were useless frozen blocks. The world spun around him. One American wrapped a blanket around his shoulders. Another offered water from a canteen. Tommy drank. The cold water hit his stomach, and he nearly vomited. "Easy, buddy," the sergeant said. "You look like hell. Where did you come from?" Tommy looked back east, toward the forest where 7 bodies lay, toward 5 days of impossible survival. "Far away," he whispered. "Very far away." Then everything went black. Tommy woke up in a field hospital. Clean sheets, a roof, heat from a nearby stove. An officer sat beside his bed. Captain Harrison, Military Intelligence. "I need you to tell me what happened." Tommy told him everything. The capture, the laugh, the 22 seconds, the 7 dead Germans. When he finished, Harrison stared in disbelief. Then Tommy pulled out the captured map. Harrison's eyes widened. "This is a complete force distribution map. Patrol routes, artillery positions, supply lines. This is gold." "Where did you get this?" "From the sergeant I killed," Tommy said. Harrison left immediately. The map changed everything. Within hours, Allied intelligence was analyzing every detail. German patrol routes matched exactly. Artillery positions were confirmed. Supply lines correlated with other reports. The map provided a complete picture of German deployments across 30 square kilometers. 3 days later, American forces launched a counterattack using the intelligence Tommy provided. They hit German supply depots that nobody knew existed. They ambushed patrols at route changeover times. They called artillery on positions marked as ammunition dumps. The Germans were caught completely off guard. In the first 24 hours, Allied forces killed or captured over 300 German soldiers, destroyed 12 supply trucks, knocked out 4 artillery batteries. All because of one map carried back by one exhausted Canadian. The intelligence Tommy brought back shortened the Battle of the Bulge by an estimated 4 days. 4 days meant hundreds of Allied lives saved, thousands of German casualties inflicted. The map proved so valuable that copies were distributed to 6 different American divisions. By January 1945, the German offensive had collapsed. The Allies were advancing again. Tommy's contribution remained classified for 50 years. The military did not want to advertise that one man had provided intelligence that affected an entire campaign. Captain Harrison submitted Tommy for the Victoria Cross. The recommendation was denied. Bureaucratic reasons, legal ambiguity. Attacking after raising hands might violate Geneva Conventions. Easier to let it disappear. Tommy received a Bronze Star instead, presented without ceremony by a colonel who had other places to be. Tommy did not care about medals. He was alive. That was the only reward that mattered. He spent 3 weeks recovering in England. His feet were saved, but 2 toes had to be amputated. He walked with a slight limp. The nightmares started. He would wake in darkness, heart pounding, certain he was still surrounded, still fighting. The dream showed him the sergeant's widening eyes, the feel of the knife, the sounds bodies made hitting frozen ground. Tommy never told anyone about the dreams. When other soldiers asked about his limp, he said frostbite. Nothing interesting. He learned to smile when he said it. Inside, he carried 7 deaths. 7 families who would receive letters beginning with the words, "We regret to inform you." But the story was not finished. The 7 bodies in the Ardennes forest, the 22 seconds of violence, the captured map that changed a battle. All of this remained buried in classified files for half a century. Only a few people knew the truth, and as years passed, even fewer remembered. In Fung 4, we will discover what happened to Thomas Blackwood after the war, how he returned to Nova Scotia and picked up his father's axe, how he carried the weight of 7 deaths for 60 years, and how a military historian finally uncovered the truth in 1994, 50 years after that frozen December day. The story of the lumberjack who laughed at death and survived the impossible was about to become legend. From a Canadian lumberjack with 1 hidden knife and an insane idea to laugh in the face of death, to 7 German soldiers dead in 22 seconds, and intelligence that shortened the Battle of the Bulge by 4 days. Thomas Blackwood proved that survival is not just about strength or weapons. Sometimes it is about reading people, about understanding psychology, about refusing to accept defeat even when every rational calculation says you are already dead. The captured map saved hundreds of Allied lives. The 22 seconds became a classified legend whispered in military intelligence circles for half a century. But what happened to the man behind the miracle? The answer is both beautiful and heartbreaking. Because sometimes the cost of doing the impossible is carrying the weight of it for the rest of your life. May 8, 1945. Victory in Europe Day. Tommy sat alone by a window in a hospital in southern England when the announcement came. Germany had surrendered. The war was over. All around him, people celebrated. Soldiers cheered, nurses hugged each other. Champagne appeared from somewhere. Laughter and singing filled the air. Tommy watched without joining. He thought about the men he had served with, the ones buried in cemeteries across Italy and France and Belgium, the ones whose bodies were never recovered. He thought about 7 Germans in a frozen forest. Somewhere in Germany, 7 families were grieving. 7 mothers had lost sons. 7 wives had lost husbands. 7 groups of children had lost fathers. Tommy did not feel like celebrating. He found a quiet bar and drank whiskey alone until closing time. Then he walked back through darkness, limping on his damaged foot, carrying weight no one else could see. September 1945. The troopship docked in Halifax Harbor. Tommy walked down the gangplank with everything he owned in one small duffel bag. A few clothes, some photographs, his discharge papers. The bronze star still in its box, never worn. He scanned the waiting crowd and saw her, his mother. Her hair had turned completely white. Her face had more lines. Her shoulders seemed smaller, as if the years had physically diminished her. But her eyes were the same strength, the same love. They embraced without speaking. Tommy buried his face in his mother's shoulder. "You came home," she whispered. "Yes, Mother." I came home. He did not tell her about the forest, did not tell her about the 7 men, did not tell her about 22 seconds that still haunted his dreams. She only needed to know her son was alive. Tommy returned to Fraserville and picked up his father's axe. He went back to the logging camps each winter, the same camps where his father had worked, the same camps where he had worked as a teenager. The work was hard, the pay was poor, but it was familiar, and it did not require talking to many people. In 1947, Tommy married Mary, the red-haired girl who had waded through 4 years of war. They had exchanged letters the entire time. She never lost faith. Their wedding was small, a ceremony in the local church, a reception in the community hall. That night, Mary asked him about the war. Tommy was quiet for a long time. "I do not like to talk about it," he finally said. Mary nodded. She did not push. Her own father had fought in the First War and never spoke about it either. She understood some experiences could not be shared. She simply took his hand in darkness and held it until they both fell asleep. The years passed. Tommy and Mary had 4 children, 3 boys and 1 girl. They named the first boy William, after Tommy's father. The logging industry declined. Tommy found work at a sawmill 20 kilometers away. Better pay, regular hours. He could come home every night. He taught his children to hunt in the forests where he had learned as a boy, to track animals, to move silently through woods, to read signs that nature provided. He did not teach them to kill people. Some lessons a father should not pass to children. The Bronze Star stayed in its box. The box stayed in a drawer. The drawer stayed closed. When neighbors asked about military service, Tommy gave the same answer. Infantry, Europe, came home safe. He smiled when he said it. No one in Fraserville knew about 22 seconds in the Ardennes. No one knew about 7 German soldiers. Tommy preferred it that way. But what Tommy did that December day in 1944 created ripples far beyond one frozen forest. The intelligence he brought back, the captured map showing German positions across 30 square kilometers, changed how Allied forces approached the final months of the European War. Military analysts studying the Battle of the Bulge concluded that Tommy's map shortened the German offensive by 4 days. 4 days meant approximately 400 Allied lives saved, 2,000 German casualties inflicted. Momentum shifted faster than it would have otherwise. But the lessons went deeper than one map. After the war, when military historians began analyzing what made some soldiers survive impossible situations, while others did not, Tommy's story kept appearing in classified reports. One man surrounded by 8 enemies, disarmed, no backup, no escape route, survival probability calculated at less than 2%. Yet he survived. How? The answer changed how special forces trained soldiers. Tommy had used psychological warfare before the term became standard military doctrine. He had weaponized confusion, created cognitive dissonance, made enemies see him as non-threatening until the moment he struck. This became foundational to modern close-quarters combat training. By the Korean War, American and Canadian special forces were teaching soldiers to recognize and exploit enemies' psychological states. Read body language. Identify moments when opponents lower their guard. Create opportunities through misdirection. The technique Tommy invented in 22 seconds of desperation became curriculum. By Vietnam, every elite unit knew variations of the principle. Confuse, misdirect, strike when threat perception drops to 0. Modern special forces, from Navy SEALs to British SAS to Israeli Sayeret Matkal, study psychological manipulation as core training. The fundamentals trace back to a Canadian lumberjack who laughed at death in the Ardennes. Numbers tell part of the story. Based on declassified estimates, the tactics derived from Tommy's survival influenced approximately 2,000 special operations missions between 1950 and 2000. Missions where psychological manipulation created windows for action against superior forces. Hostage rescues, counter-terrorism operations, reconnaissance missions behind enemy lines. How many of those succeeded because operators understood what Tommy proved in that frozen forest? We will never know exactly, but military psychologists credit his example with fundamentally shifting how soldiers think about asymmetric combat. You do not need to be stronger. You need to be smarter about human psychology. That lesson saved lives for 60 years, and it continues today. Modern military training in psychological operations, in reading microexpressions, in exploiting cognitive biases, all descends from the same insight. Tommy Blackwood was not the first person to use psychology in combat, but he was the first to demonstrate its power in such an impossible situation, with such devastating effectiveness in such a short time. 22 seconds became a case study taught at military academies worldwide. But the deepest lesson is not about combat tactics. It is about innovation in the face of institutional resistance. Tommy's story represents something larger than one man's survival. It represents every person who saw a solution others missed, every individual dismissed as crazy until results proved them right. History is full of these moments. In 1943, Jeffrey Pike proposed building aircraft carriers from ice mixed with wood pulp. Insane, they said. Yet Project Habakkuk nearly worked and proved unconventional thinking could challenge naval warfare. In 1945, Curtis LeMay proposed low-altitude firebombing raids over Japan, when everyone said high-altitude precision bombing was the only way. Suicidal, they said. Yet the tactic ended the war faster. Tommy's survival was not about tactics. It was about refusing to accept someone else's definition of impossible. This connects to today. In every organization, military or civilian, people propose ideas that challenge convention. Most get rejected. The system protects itself. Following procedure feels safer than risking failure on something new. But progress comes from people who try anyway, who test ideas despite skepticism, who prove through results what words cannot convince. Tommy did not ask permission to laugh at his captors, did not submit his plan for approval. He simply acted when the moment came. That spirit of independent problem-solving in crisis situations defines innovation. Whether in combat, business, technology, or society, breakthrough often comes from individuals who see possibilities others miss, who trust their instincts when data says impossible, who act despite fear because doing nothing guarantees failure. That is Tommy's real legacy, not the 7 bodies in the snow. The proof that one person thinking differently in an impossible moment can change outcomes everyone else accepts as predetermined. And there is one final detail most people never learn. In 1994, 50 years after the events, military historian David Chen discovered Tommy's story buried in declassified files. He spent 2 years investigating, searching records, interviewing veterans, cross-referencing dates. Finally, he found Thomas Blackwood, 74 years old, still living in Fraserville. They talked for 4 hours. Chen asked why Tommy never told anyone. "Because there is nothing to be proud of," Tommy said. "I killed 7 men. They had families. They had lives. I took everything from them in 22 seconds." Chen tried to explain it was war, self-defense, necessary. Tommy cut him off. It does not bring those men back. It does not give their children fathers. So I do not talk about it. I just live my life and try to be a good husband and father and grandfather. That is the only thing I can do now. In 1995, the Canadian Veterans Association held a ceremony commemorating the 50th anniversary of the war's end. Chen convinced them to invite Tommy as guest of honor. Tommy did not want to go, but Mary took his hand and said softly, "Tommy, it has been 50 years, long enough to carry this alone." At the ceremony, an elderly American man approached the microphone. Robert Miller, one of 3 soldiers who found Tommy nearly dead on that forest road in December 1944. Miller had spent 50 years wondering what happened to the man they saved. Now he knew. He turned to face Tommy directly and raised his hand in salute. "Sir, what you did was the most extraordinary thing I have ever heard. Thank you." The hall erupted in applause, and for the first time in 50 years, Thomas Blackwood allowed himself to cry in front of other people. Tommy died peacefully in 2003 at age 83. Mary was holding his hand. The headstone read simply, "Thomas Blackwood, 1920 to 2003. Beloved husband, wonderful father, proud grandfather, Royal Canadian Regiment." No mention of 7 men or 22 seconds. That was how Tommy wanted it. But David Chen published a book. 45 Seconds in the Ardennes Forest became required reading at the Royal Canadian Military College. Not teaching combat techniques, teaching psychology, teaching about reading people, teaching about never giving up. A professor wrote in curriculum notes, "Blackwood won because he understood them. He read their overconfidence, their exhaustion, their lowered guard, and exploited all of it in 22 seconds. From a 7-year-old boy holding a rifle heavier than his arm, learning to never miss because his family's survival depended on it, to a 74-year-old man carrying the weight of 7 deaths for 50 years. Thomas Blackwood proved that true strength is not about muscles or weapons. It is about understanding human nature, about reading the unspoken, about getting back up no matter how many times life knocks you down." And because one lumberjack refused to accept capture in a frozen forest, because he laughed when he should have surrendered, because he turned psychology into a weapon in 22 desperate seconds, approximately 400 Allied soldiers survived the Battle of the Bulge, who otherwise would not have. Thousands of special operations troops trained in tactics derived from his example. That is the power of one person refusing to accept impossible. As long as you get back up, his mother taught him, you have not lost. Tommy Blackwood got back up, and he never lost.